느껴보시면 너무 좋지 않을까 생각해 봅니다.
네, 저는 담양 중노차 문화원 영농조합법인 대표 최종순입니다. 담양의 중노차를 조금 더 저희 담양뿐만 아니라 전국적으로 또 세계적으로 이렇게 알릴 수 있었으면 좋겠다라는 생각으로 저희 5명의 엄마들이 뭉쳐서 만든 법인입니다. 대나무 밑에 자라고 있는 그 차나무를 대나무 이슬을 맞고 자란 차라 그래서 대죽자 이슬로자 중노차라고 하는데요. 그 중노차는 인위적으로 우리가 비료, 농약 이런 것을 주지 않고 자연 그대로 상태에서 이렇게 자라고 있기 때문에 일단 재료 자체가 아주 맑고 청정하다라고 생각을 하고요.
오늘은 간단하게 이제 차를 우리는 방법에 대해서 설명을 해드릴 거예요. 우선 차를 우릴 때 사용하는 도구는 크게 2가지가 들어가요. 첫 번째, 이쪽에 있는 도구, 차 주전자라고 부르는 다관입니다. 그 다음에 이쪽은 비슷하게 생긴 그릇이 하나 더 있는데 이거는 숯우라고 부르는 그릇이고 우리나라 말로 풀이하면 물 식힘 그릇이라고 불리는 도구예요. 첫 번째로는 이 찻잎을 여기에다가 넣고 차를 우려낸 후에 차가 잘 우러나면 다시 이쪽으로 떨어내게 되는 방법인데요. 끓는 물들을 차를 이용하는 도구들을 이용해서 한 번씩 다 데워주는 과정인데 차의 맛을 유지하기 위해서 그릇들을 먼저 데워주는 과정입니다. 찻잎을 넣어서 차 주전자로 넣으시면 됩니다. 그리고 따르실 때는 한 번에 한 잔씩 꽉 채우지 마시고 왔다 갔다 해주면서 드시면 좋습니다.
In our headlines on this Thursday, March 20th, here in South Korea. A bill to overhaul Korea's pension system secures bipartisan approval at a plenary session earlier this afternoon that will see the pension contribution rate rising to 13% from the current 9%. And the Constitutional Court says it will share its ruling on the impeachment of Prime Minister Han Duck-soo on the morning of next Monday, that is March 24th. Meanwhile, the U.S. Federal Reserve decides to maintain its key rate unchanged since mid-December at a range of 4.25% to 4.5% amid fears of slower economic growth and higher inflation fueled by the Trump administration's tariffs. We start with the latest on the local political front. The fate of Prime Minister Han Duck-soo will be determined next Monday. According to the court today, its ruling on the impeachment of Han will be shared on the morning of March 24th. Now, this verdict comes 87 days after the opposition-led National Assembly voted to remove him from his post as acting president following his reluctance to approve new justices for the Constitutional Court. Meanwhile, at the Parliament, a bill to overhaul Korea's pension system secured bipartisan approval. Now, the gist of the new plan is to pay more to get more. I have our correspondent Kim Do-yeon live on the line with more. Do-yeon, welcome. Let's begin with the significance of this latest event.
That's right, Sunny. It's significant in that this is a reform to the nation's pension system, a sensitive issue that requires agreements across the aisle, generations, and working classes. But something that needs to be done as the fund will be depleted due to the aging population and the low birth rate. This also comes as the nation's political scene has only been seeing strong standoffs. First, take a listen to what the Speaker of the National Assembly had to say.
At a time of heightened tension and deep conflict, it was truly a valuable process for both the ruling and opposition parties to come together with a focus on the lives of the people. I believe this is a significant matter that will be greatly recorded in our political and social history.
Now, to be specific, the current insurance premium stands at 9%, and it will be raised by 0.5% annually for the next 8 years to reach 13%. That means that the portion from people's paychecks will be bigger. But starting next year, the money you receive after retiring will be at 43%. According to the current standing pension system, the return rate was at 41.5% this year, but was gradually getting lower, with the goal of 40% by 2028. The credit system has also been expanded. Credit means additional months added to the insured period for specific people. Those who served mandatory military service will now receive 12 additional months in their pension credit instead of 6. Women who give birth will also receive credits. For the first 2 children, it will be 12 months each, while starting from the 3rd child, it'll be 18 months. However, there are more things that need to be settled, and that is why the two parties have agreed to kick off a special committee. The current system, according to the new plan, pushed back the depletion of the fund by around 10 years until around 2055. The committee is set to tackle issues like this going forward.
Right. Now, despite the consensus, Do-yeon, with regard to pension reform, I understand lawmakers continue to clash over other matters.
That's right, Sunny. The main opposition Democratic Party of Korea is set to unilaterally pass another special pro-bill against First Lady Kim Gun-hee. The bill would kick off an investigation into the First Lady and her allegations of stock meddling. Such a bill had been passed unilaterally 4 times before and was vetoed 3 times by President Yoon Suk-yeol and once by then-acting President Han Duck-soo. In addition, another special pro-bill is likely to be passed unilaterally, a new one that would look into the allegations that some customs officers were involved in smuggling drugs into South Korea, with the allegations pointing toward the top office. That's all for now. Back to you, Sunny.
All right, Owen, thank you for the latest at the National Assembly. The economic effects of Korea's political paralysis have been extensive, to say the least. And nowhere has this been more pronounced than in domestic spending patterns as consumers maintain a tight grip on purse strings. Our Moon Hye-ryun files this report.
South Korea's ongoing presidential impeachment trial is weighing heavily on the economy. Both the Bank of Korea and the state-run Korea Development Institute have revised their economic growth forecasts downward, citing weak domestic demand fueled by political uncertainty. Consumer sentiment, as measured by the central bank, saw its steepest drop since the COVID-19 pandemic in December, following the martial law declaration and subsequent trials. Months down the line, it has yet to recover. Despite the national's Seollal holiday in January, which typically boosts spending, consumer spending declined. Rising costs of raw materials and ingredients have only exacerbated the situation, hitting small business owners, particularly restaurants, the hardest.
If political instability drags on, it's hard to predict an economic recovery in the future. So when consumers feel uncertain, they tend to cut back on spending. One of the first things they cut out is dining out.
This small restaurant, usually packed at lunchtime, now sits idle. The owner says sales have plunged since December.
Since December, most reservations have been cancelled. At first, sales dropped to about a third of previous levels, but recently they've plunged to nearly half or even 2/3.
And this is just one of many. According to Statistics Korea, the number of small business owners in the country fell for the first time in January since 2021. Economists warn that continued political instability can push back important economic decisions being made, not just regarding domestic demand, but also in response to the new Trump administration's protectionist policies, which could further strain South Korea's economy.
We need to take a more proactive approach. If there are U.S. goods or services we plan to purchase, we should buy them in advance. And companies with investment plans should consider moving them up. This could help mitigate the effects of the Trump administration's trade policies. Right now, our economy is facing even greater challenges than in the past, partly due to a lack of strong fiscal policy.
As domestic and international uncertainties converge, the future of South Korea's economic outlook remains fragile. Moon Hye-ryun, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, as widely anticipated, the U.S. Federal Reserve is holding its key rate steady for the second session in a row amid concerns of a slower growth and higher inflation as the U.S. adapts to tougher Trump tariffs on American trade partners. Our Lee Soo-jin reports.
The U.S. Federal Reserve has decided to once again keep its benchmark interest rate unchanged, but signal potential rate cuts in future meetings. In its second monetary policy meeting of the year on Wednesday, the central bank kept its key borrowing rate steady at its current range of 4.25% to 4.5%. The Federal Open Market Committee has put a pause in its rate-cutting cycle since December last year after carrying out 3 consecutive reductions. The decision comes as Federal Reserve officials lowered their outlook for economic growth for this year to 1.7% from 2.1% in their December projection.
Uncertainty today is unusually elevated. As the economy evolves, we will adjust our policy stance in a manner that best promotes our maximum employment and price stability goals.
The Fed's goals of maintaining maximum employment and low inflation are referred to as its dual mandate. Powell said that the uncertainty comes from the changes that policies, particularly trade, but also immigration, fiscal policy, and regulation will bring to the economy. The rate-setting committee, which releases a summary of economic projections after its March, June, September, and December meetings, projected slightly higher unemployment of 4.4% from 4.3% by the end of the year. Inflation was also forecast to rise as personal consumption expenditure, a measure of consumer spending, and core inflation, which excludes energy and food prices, were both revised upward. Powell acknowledged that tariffs have already contributed to the rise in inflation. The Trump administration imposed 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum imports last Wednesday, triggering retaliatory tariffs from Canada and the EU, with reciprocal U.S. tariffs set for April 2nd. But with officials expecting the Fed to implement a total of 0.5 percentage point in rate cuts in 2025, 2 reductions are likely this year as rate cuts are typically in quarter-point increments. This latest decision keeps the interest rate gap between South Korea and the U.S. at 1.75 percentage points, with the Bank of Korea slashing its key interest rate to 2.75% in its last meeting in February. All 3 major U.S. stock indexes, the Dow Jones, S&P 500, and the Nasdaq, showed an upward trajectory following the Fed's decision. 이수진, Arirang News.
The Bank of Korea says the U.S. Federal Reserve's rate freeze stands in line with widespread expectations and has warned of mounting risk factors amid geopolitical and trade tensions. Separately, acting President Choi Sang-mok has reiterated calls on economic and financial authorities to maintain close monitoring of markets here and of U.S. trade-related decisions. He also echoed concerns by the central bank about growing external uncertainty over global trade and geopolitical stability, given the fresh fighting in the Middle East and continued conflict in Ukraine. Also in local news, marriages rose remarkably while divorces dropped last year. According to Statistics Korea, there were 222,000 marriages in 2024, up 15% on year, the highest since related data collection began in 1970. Officials note the rise was led by newlyweds in their early to mid-30s and linked the phenomenon to postponed wedding plans owing to the COVID-19 pandemic. Divorces, meanwhile, declined by 1% on year, marking the 5th annual fall in a row since the year 2020. A major military exercise between South Korea and the U.S. came to an end on this Thursday after 11 days of comprehensive drills. Now, this year's Freedom Shield was the first under the second Trump administration and featured expanded on-field drills. It also took into account realistic threats such as the potential changes in North Korea's military strategy in light of its defense deal with Russia. Meanwhile, North Korea, for its part, condemned the annual training between South Korea and the U.S. and test-launched a series of close-range ballistic missiles into the West Sea on the first day of the training, but stayed silent in the following days. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy agrees to a partial ceasefire with the Kremlin on energy facilities during talks on the phone with U.S. President Donald Trump on Wednesday. Our Choi Soo-young has the latest.
U.S. President Trump and Ukraine's President Zelenskyy have had a direct phone call to talk about a ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine. On Wednesday local time, Trump posted on his social media platform Truth Social that called to align both Russia and Ukraine in terms of the request and needs lasted about an hour and went smoothly. Trump said Zelenskyy also agreed on a partial ceasefire for energy and infrastructure facilities. During the call, Trump suggested that the U.S. could help with nuclear power plant operations using its expertise in the energy sector.
He said that the United States could be very helpful in running those plants with its electricity and utility expertise. American ownership of those plants would be the best protection for that infrastructure and support for Ukrainian energy infrastructure.
The White House added that the U.S. will continue to provide intelligence resources to Ukraine to end the war. This means that Trump rejected Putin's demand to stop military support and intelligence sharing with Ukraine.
They reviewed the situation in Kursk and agreed to share information closely between their defense staffs as the battlefield situation evolved.
President Zelenskyy also reportedly requested additional air defense systems, including the Patriot missile system, and Trump said he would work to find available systems in Europe to support Ukraine. Trump also promised to help ensure that children who were kidnapped or went missing during the war could return to Ukraine. Regarding the partial deal, on Tuesday after the call with Putin, the White House stated that the U.S. position supports a ceasefire for energy and infrastructure, not just energy infrastructure, as Russia claims. The U.S. will continue negotiations with Russia for a wider ceasefire deal in meetings in Saudi Arabia in the end of this week. Choi Soo-young, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, in the Middle East, Israel has redeployed its boots on the ground in Gaza, further fueling fears about the fate of civilians in the region. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
Airstrikes in Gaza on Tuesday killed at least 400 Palestinians, ending the 2 months of relative calm in the enclave. On Wednesday, Israel resumed ground defenses following the end of the first phase of the ceasefire agreement earlier this month and killed dozens more. Israeli forces say it regained control of the Netzarim corridor in order to expand a security zone and create a partial buffer between the northern and southern regions of the Gaza Strip. The Israeli military had withdrawn from the corridor last month, allowing civilians in central and southern Gaza to return to what little remained of their homes in the north. The resumption of Israeli strikes comes as the two sides have failed to come to an agreement on the second phase of the ceasefire deal that would have released more Israeli hostages. Meanwhile, with the resumption of Israeli strikes, the United Nations says one of its workers was killed and others injured after a compound in Gaza was damaged on Wednesday. The Palestinian Health Ministry blamed an Israeli strike, while Israel's military denied striking the UN compound in Deir al-Balah. The UN Office for Project Services said that an explosive ordnance was dropped or fired at the compound. However, added that there was no confirmation on the nature of the incident or the type of artillery used. The UN OPS stressed that the incident was not an accident, while UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres condemned the attack and called for a full investigation. More than 300 humanitarian workers have been killed in Gaza since October 7, 2023, with most being staff members of the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian refugees in the Near East. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Back on the local front, acting President Choi Sang-mok was at the ancient Korean city of Gyeongju today as the city is poised to host the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit this autumn. On the checklist were accommodation, transportation, and the city's framework for public safety. Choi also pledged full government support to ensure a successful APEC summit this year, which is Korea's second hosting of the event, following the first in the southern port city of Busan back in the year 2005. Meanwhile, at a meeting that followed, Choi also shared intentions to bolster tourism to different parts of the country among international visitors. The Korean Cultural Center Library in New York has clinched one of the world's top 3 design awards. According to the Culture Ministry here, the library has won the 2025 IF Design Award in the Public Interiors category for its unique structure inspired by Korea's traditional wooden architecture, the hanok. The library's bookshelves feature 단청, the colorful decorative patterns of hanok, highlighting the beauty of Korean heritage. The library, which opened last June, houses some 10,000 books about Korea. On the medical front, researchers here are working on a screening program that can detect early-stage lung cancer simply by analyzing a person's breath. Our Cha Yun-kyung explains.
The Electronics and Telecommunications Research Institute, or ETRI, has come out with an artificial intelligence deep learning system to detect early-stage lung cancer. When a potential patient exhales into a vinyl mesh that acts as an initiator system sensor, it can determine if cancer cells are prevalent in 20 minutes by running the exhaled air through 70 primary sensors that can detect volatile organic compounds. The system is cheaper and less time-consuming compared to X-rays, CT scans, or blood tests.
The system is non-invasive, which allows us to detect cancer in an easier way than radiation exposure or blood sampling.
ETRI has undertaken cooperative research over the past 10 years with Seoul National University Bundang Hospital, confirming that the screening test is 95% accurate by analyzing data from 180 samples.
The meaning of this research is that it actively found biomarkers compared to other institutes. I believe that there should be more cooperative research with much more data.
Researchers mentioned that they will undertake additional clinical trials of more than 1,000 patients to collect more data. Also, researchers will secure reproducibility and reliability of the screening test through collaboration with national and international researchers. Researchers are also planning to apply the screening test system for other cancers, such as stomach and colorectal, through additional research. 차윤경, Arirang News.
This is The World Now, bringing you the latest stories from around the globe. Turkey is seeing widespread protests following the arrest of Istanbul mayor and potential presidential candidate Ekrem İmamoğlu. On Wednesday local time, Turkey authorities detained İmamoğlu on charges of corruption and alleged links to terrorist organizations. The arrest comes just days before the Republican People's Party primaries, where İmamoğlu, a prominent opposition figure against President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, was anticipated to be nominated as the presidential candidate for the 2028 elections. İmamoğlu's party has denounced the detention as a coup, arguing that it's politically motivated to undermine the opposition. In response to the arrest, thousands of citizens have taken to the streets in Istanbul and Ankara to protest what they see as a violation of democratic processes. The Turkey government has refuted allegations linking İmamoğlu's detention to President Erdogan. In Africa, the presidents of the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda have addressed the escalating conflict in eastern DRC in their first in-person encounter since hostilities resurged in the region earlier this year. President Felix Tshisekedi of the DRC and President Paul Kagame of Rwanda met in Qatar on Tuesday, facilitated by Qatari Emir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani. The leaders jointly called for an immediate and unconditional ceasefire in eastern DRC to stop the ongoing violence that has resulted in thousands of deaths and displacement of millions. The conflict intensified in January when the M23 rebel group, reportedly backed by Rwanda, captured key cities in the mineral-rich eastern region of the DRC. The DRC government accuses Rwanda of supporting the M23 rebels, while Rwanda denies the claim, asserting its forces act in self-defense. In Germany, the outgoing government has approved approximately $3.3 billion in additional military aid for Ukraine. The decision announced by the Finance Ministry on Wednesday local time follows a recent fiscal policy overhaul that allows increased borrowing to support defense initiatives. The aid package includes $2.8 billion allocated for immediate military assistance, supplemented by reimbursements from the European Peace Facility. Germany also plans to commit an additional $8.9 billion between 2026 and 2029 to bolster Ukraine's defense capabilities. In other news, German automaker Mercedes-Benz is integrating AI-powered humanoid robots into its manufacturing processes at the Digital Factory campus in Berlin. According to reports on Tuesday, the automaker is testing the 175-centimeters Apollo robot in collaboration with US-based robotics firm Apptronik to handle tasks such as transporting components and conducting quality inspections. Unlike traditional factory robots, Apollo isn't fixed and can move around. The aim is to enhance efficiency by automating repetitive and physically demanding activities and allowing human workers to focus on more complex tasks. 최지희, Arirang News.
It's spring equinox today, and spring is making its way in. Some cherry blossoms are already starting to bloom in some parts of Busan even before the official season begins. A morning jacket felt almost too warm in the afternoon, but it's going to feel warmer tomorrow, feeling more like mid-April. But we have to talk about air quality. Smog that moved into western regions and parts of Gyeongju today will remain high through tomorrow. Tomorrow morning should be more manageable under sunny skies. Those in Chuncheon should notice a big rise in morning temperatures starting off at 3 degrees Celsius. And by the afternoon, Chuncheon will see a high of 18 degrees. And so as here in the capital, Daegu and Gyeongju will be seeing highs of 22 degrees. By the weekend, we are expecting temperatures around 20 degrees Celsius here in Seoul. It's going to feel more like the end of April on Sunday at a high of 21 degrees Celsius. But hopefully, the air quality is promising for us. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
Right, that ends our newscast for now. Thank you for watching. Up next is our daily panel session.
How to survive in Korea. Barbecue restaurants. Step 1. Taking care of your clothes. Put your jacket in the plastic bag. Seal it tight. If the stool flips open, store your clothes inside. Wearing light colors? Grab an apron. It's the best defense against oil splatter and smoke. Step 2. Bottomless side dishes. Basic side dishes at a barbecue restaurant. Eat and eat as much as you want. Side dishes come with free refills. Oh, and if you don't see this sign, just ask, 사장님, 여기 밑반찬 좀 더 주세요. Simple, isn't it? Step 3. Grilling meat. There are various kinds of samgyeopsal in Korea. Place the meat on the grill. Turn it over when golden. And again when it looks done. Again and again and again. Step 4. Sam style. You aren't taking bites of sam like a taco, are you? In Korea, we have it in one bite. A pro tip here. Add only as much as you can handle in a bite. Gotta avoid awkward situations. Step 5. Enjoy the perks. After the meal, enjoy the perks offered as a Korean restaurant. Fabric refreshers get rid of the barbecue smell, while mint candies freshen your breath. Did you survive the barbecue restaurant? Hang on. Are you here with someone you want to impress? Then let's skip the garlic. Who knows what will happen?
Capturing your day starts at New Day at Arirang.
A global conversation through the unique lens of millennials and Gen Z's. News Generation.
From politics to culture, delivering news from home and abroad. The Daily Report. A profound analysis of Korea by members of the media. Press Perspective.
A distinct perspective and a broader view. News Center.
A compelling discussion spotlighting domestic and international affairs within the frame.
Opening new vistas through a window of truth, connecting Korea and the world. Your pick, Arirang News.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy agrees to a partial ceasefire with the Kremlin on energy infrastructure during talks on the phone with U.S. President Donald Trump on Wednesday, following the latter's engagement with his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin a day earlier. We have more on the path to peace for Ukraine on Press Perspective today. Hello and welcome to Press Perspective for this Thursday, March 20th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sun-hee. Today we touch upon U.S. efforts to end the 3-year Russian aggression against Ukraine, given its broader implications on global stability and order. For this, I have Celio Ferretti for French daily Le Croix. Celio, it's great to have you back.
Glad to be here.
I also have Rui Valdez with Spanish news agency EFE Spain. Rui, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
It's a pleasure to be here too, Sonia.
Celia, we'll start with you. Let's take this in chronological order. So earlier this week, that would be Tuesday U.S. time, Mr. Trump spoke on the phone with his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin. What has been shared about the details of their talks by their respective top officers?
Indeed, we're seeing some development on a possible peace or a truce, at least in Russia's war on Ukraine. The White House said a lengthy phone call between President Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin had achieved a movement to peace, while Putin and Trump agreed on an immediate pause on strikes against energy and infrastructure. The Kremlin makes it clear that Russia has many additional demands that it will consider for a broader ceasefire. Hours after the call, air raid sirens sounded and explosion rocked Ukraine, Ukrainian capital city Kyiv. The White House and the Kremlin both said they agreed to begin negotiation immediately to achieve a fuller ceasefire. We'll see how that can be achieved. During this 90-minute long call, Donald Trump really insisted on improving U.S.-Russia relations. That's really is in main focus during the discussion. So the peace is something for him to achieve a better relation with Vladimir Putin. In the end, he said that Russia has a huge upside, including enormous economic deals and geopolitical stability when peace will be achieved. Mr. Trump also said that negotiations are complicated, and he would like to meet Putin face-to-face anytime soon to really maybe make it move a bit faster for him. Last week, delegate from U.S. and Ukraine met in Saudi Arabia and proposed a 30-day ceasefire. Well, Putin accepted the idea for a ceasefire in principle. He did not commit to any deals on this, and more discussion will be needed. On the Kremlin side of the phone call, Vladimir Putin said the peace will require conditions such as putting a stop to intelligence sharing between Western countries and Ukraine, and as well as stopping any military aid to Kyiv. Putin also mentioned that he doesn't trust the Ukrainians that much to really enforce the ceasefire, so we'll see how it goes. But peace might be on the way, but it's a long way to go.
Right. And Rui, before we touch upon details with regard to the talk between Mr. Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, for the sake of clarity, could you walk us through the conditions set forth by Russia for a ceasefire and the conditions set forth by the U.S. and Ukraine for a ceasefire?
Yes, well, starting with the Kremlin, there was a little bit of discrepancies in the statements made by the Kremlin, White House, and Kiev. The Kremlin said that they only agreed on ceasefire on energy infrastructure. That was the condition. But the White House added infrastructure in general, so energy facilities plus infrastructure, without giving much detail of what that means. So it's still not that clear what will be the final agreement. Celio say this is just in principle that they agreed on this temporary ceasefire. But also Ukraine, as we will speak later, said that they will stop attacking energy facilities, but also he mentioned railroads and ports as part of the parts of the ceasefire agreement that they will not attack. So it's a little bit difficult to know at this moment exactly how this will end, but
everybody's saying that in Saudi Arabia they will discuss the technicalities related to this matter. And yeah, so for now, that's more or less the general scope. Celio put it out very well already.
Right, so what do we know about the talks between Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy and Donald Trump that took place on Wednesday, U.S. time?
Yeah, we know that also Zelenskyy seemed open to the idea of the temporary ceasefire, but he also did not agree with the request of Putin of saying that all the military aid from the West should stop to Ukraine. That part is still in disagreement. But he said also an interesting thing. During the talks, Trump made a proposition. He said that maybe the U.S. could own one of a major nuclear plant of Ukraine in order to protect it from attacks from Russia. Zelenskyy didn't fully agree on that, but was open apparently to the proposal. So, and basically, just as Putin said, this is all in principle because later on they will finalize all the technical details. There's still some skepticism around about this ceasefire, as Elio pointed out, right after the talk of Trump and Putin, they were allegedly Putin ordered to stop to ceasefire in the energy facilities. That night, Kiev accused the Kremlin of attacking one of the energy facilities, and also Russia claimed that Ukraine did the same thing. So the skepticism about this temporary ceasefire agreement is still in the air. So we have to be very careful about the interpretations in this regard.
In the meantime, though, Celio, France and Germany continue to highlight the importance of Ukraine's role in peace talks with Russia. Tell us a bit more about that.
Exactly. What Europeans want the most is to not be sidelined. In the peace talk about a war on their own soil, Europe is at the core of the war. If we remember, the revolution that happened more than 10 years ago in Ukraine was motivated at pro-EU sentiment. So they're really pushing for Ukraine to be in the loop, to be in the discussion. But of course, Europe with her. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and French President Emmanuel Macron reaffirmed on Tuesday that any peace negotiation regarding the conflict in Ukraine must fully involve the Ukrainian government. During a meeting in Berlin, the two leaders underscored their unwavering support for Kyiv, emphasizing that no decision about Ukraine's future should be made over the heads of the Ukrainian people. The risk is that if Trump and Putin might agree on something and enforce it, it will impose peace on Ukraine without any Ukraine having any words on the peace talks. The talks came ahead of a European Council summit in Brussels later this week, where Ukraine, European defense and economic competitiveness will be key topic of the discussion for maybe the peace talk and the whole relationship between Europe and Ukraine after. Scholz reaffirmed that Ukraine can fully rely on Europe for its future. Macron echoed this sentiment, affirming that Europe continued support for Ukraine to ensure a stable and lasting relationship. He welcomed the Trump and Putin phone call, saying it's a good way, a first step toward peace talks. According to Macron, France, Britain and Germany have played a constructive role in persuading Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy to accept a ceasefire and move towards the negotiation that at the first he could be maybe a bit reluctant, but they really insisted that it's in everyone's interest to at least talk and make a peace talk move further away.
Right. French President Emmanuel Macron also spoke about extending France's nuclear umbrella to its allies. What's the latest on that front?
Indeed, French President Emmanuel Macron is showcasing France's plans to upgrade its nuclear arsenal as he seeks to engage in talks with Germany to extend its European powers, extending its country a nuclear umbrella for European powers. On Tuesday, Macron visited an air base in the eastern town of Luçoil-les-Bains, announcing plans to spend close to $1.5 billion to modernize the facility so that it can host a fleet of 40 Rafale jet fighters. And these fighter jets can are able to carry nuclear weapons. Friedrich Merz, who is poised to become Germany's next chancellor, has called for talks with France and UK, the continent's only nuclear weapons, nuclear powers in Europe, to extend a deterrence over other European countries, including Germany. And this is not a new idea, actually. As Merz recalled, French President Charles de Gaulle, back in the 60s, already offered to protect Europe with French nuclear weapons. But at the time, U.S. was more important, so Europe sided with U.S. But now, Friedrich Merz said that maybe it's time for Germany to accept this offer made by France and to have discussion without taboo about French nuclear weapon being used for European defense. Macron has for years pushed this idea and pushed the idea to European leaders to develop an autonomy, a strategic autonomy for Europe to defend itself without relying too much on the US. At first, this idea, even back in 2017 or 18, many European nations were a bit scared or reluctant to really fully engage with France on this path because they were scared that maybe autonomous European defense will jeopardize NATO treaty. But now with Trump being more and more unreliable or maybe obscure about his true intention for Europe, many countries are now pushing to join France and maybe have autonomy, more autonomy in the defense. France's nuclear arsenal is also much smaller than what the US has, with maybe 200 nuclear weapons. But still, France said it's enough for European defense on just to protect the continent.
Right. All this being said, Rui, the big question now is, can France's nuclear umbrella protect Europe? What appears to be the general consensus on that front?
Well, there's a lot of debate about that. First of all, they say that considering the amount of nuclear warheads that France has in comparison to Russia and US together, which I think they have around, they calculate between 5,000 and 10,000 between those two big nations, they think that France has the capability as a decent nuclear power, but not to apply deterrence. And what Macron is trying to do, it seems, is that by expanding its arsenal in these planes, Rafale planes, is to start planning for a possible distribution of the nuclear warheads across Europe to defend different parts of it. The problem is that the nuclear doctrine of France doesn't really, at this moment, allows the nation to do that. They only are able to use, I mean, in paper, their nuclear arsenal in the most urgent situation, unlike US that can use it as deterrence to protect other countries. So in order for France to be able to apply this, not only possibly will need to increase its nuclear capabilities, but also will have to change its whole coordination, its whole doctrine regarding this issue. And there is another thing. The UK, people are saying, well, also the UK is the other country in Europe that has nuclear warheads. How could they participate in this? And they have two problems. First of all, they are no longer part of the European Union, which creates a little bit of problems there. But the biggest issue is that they still depend on the US for assessment and maintenance of their nuclear arsenal. This means that if they want to use their nuclear arsenal, they most likely will need the assistance of US. And as Elliot points out, right now, nobody really knows with clarity what's the final objective of the Trump administration in this regard. So we could say that the UK being more dependent on the US, it doesn't present itself as a strong nuclear power as compared to France. That, yeah, if somebody's going to take the lead, it's France. The thing is that at this moment, we don't know how this is going to end. But at some point, and I was discussing this with Celio before, if the European Union is pushed to use France as the leader or as the nuclear umbrella, of the applier of this nuclear umbrella, then maybe we're going to start thinking that this is a big reason for the European Union to to exist, right? Many people question its existence, and now we know that if U.S. abandon them, probably through unity and through a new leadership that is inside Europe, the whole idea of the European Union, for many people, start to make sense again.
Right.
Yeah.
Rui, this is an impromptu question. You can give me a brief answer. Do you suppose, amid such talk about the need to protect, to raise defense infrastructure among countries, do you suppose Mr. Trump's presence at the White House will start another nuclear arms race?
Well, that's a big question. I did read that from experts. For example, if France wanted to increase its nuclear arsenal just by 100 more nuclear warheads, it could take them decades. So it's not as simple and it's not necessarily as fast. On the other hand, yeah, there's more pressure for countries to start doing this. Ukraine, one of the reasons many people believe Ukraine was attacked was because Ukraine lacked of nuclear weapons. So if this is actually a reason that other countries interpret to increase their own defense, yeah, well, sadly, maybe we are looking at a world where more and more countries will increase their nuclear capabilities.
Right, which is a really scary thought.
Very scary.
Celia, moving on, also this week, there was a war of words, if you will, between a French politician and the White House press secretary. For the sake of those who may not be familiar with this confrontation, could you walk us through it? And what are your takeaways, speaking as a French journalist here?
The French politicians are making themselves heard in the U.S. In the last 2 weeks, we had a few word fights with the White House. It started actually with Claude Maluret, a long-time conservative French senator, during a speech on international policy in the French Senate. He described Trump as an incendiary emperor with a Nero's-like court, Nero being the Roman emperor that, according to the legend, made his own city, Rome, burn. He attacked Elon Musk too, saying he's a ketamine-fueled buffoon. Overall, his speech criticized Trump, describing as an American danger for Americans and for the rest of the world. The video of his speech was translated and gained a lot of attention in the US, and Claude Maluret also got quite a lot of popularity there. What Claude Maluret said about this is quite interesting, actually. He regretted that this sort of brave speech against Trump has to be made by a French politician, and that we don't hear so much of the American politician actually opposing Trump. More recently, also another politician, this time the socialist Raphael Glucksmann, asked the US to give back the Statue of Liberty. He said, "We gave it to you as a gift, because you value freedom and liberty, but apparently you despise it, so it will be just fine back home." The Statue of Liberty, which now sits in New York Harbor, was a gift from France to the US in 1886 to celebrate the anniversary of the American independence, which France financed in a major part, actually. The White House answered with what is now their very rude approach. I quote, the White House personnel, "My advice to that unnamed low-level French politician would be to remind them that it's only because of the United States of America that France doesn't speak German." A shameful answer, as described Raphael Glucksmann, the French politician. My takeaway from all of this is that while the two comments by Maluret and Glucksmann are communication stunts, although certainly sincere fear about Trump, it is interesting to see that this is the only opposition we have against Trump in the West. I agree with Claude Maluret when he said we don't hear so much from the US politicians to actually raise their voice and show that Trump is not fully in charge of the country. There's some people that doesn't condone what he's doing, what he's saying. But the Democratic Party is in shambles in the US, and it has to be the European to raise their voice and really try to protect the West and its value of democracy and liberty. Maybe it shows more than what France is thinking. It shows more in what situation the United States policy is actually right now.
Right, and speaking about the US policy, especially with its foreign partners, Rui, what can you tell us about the trade talks between Mexico and the US?
Well, yes, this matter has been, Mexico has been the center of attention for many countries because many foreign companies have industry there or investment there because of nearshorings and other elements related to the free trade agreement that they have in North America. Yeah, so right now the current situation is that Trump administration postponed the application of 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum until April. The hope of Mexico is that through negotiations they will get another postponement, or probably they will reach some other agreement. The situation is getting interesting in Mexico because Trump has spoken very well about our president, and you know, with Trump, those signals do matter a lot. What I'm trying to say here is that many people think that when Trump says, oh, he actually said last time, like a Mexican president is very tough woman, or she's very smart. He's giving signals of maybe some agreements that are being done behind the scenes, and also in the facts is that Mexico has actually cooperated a lot with what Trump has been demanding in order to give in a little bit more in these negotiations. For instance, well, let me start with something. A very important thing to take into consideration is why Trump imposes tariffs to everyone, right? 25% is like a number that is applied generally. Well, because he found out since long ago, through his president power, he can actually apply that, justifying matters of national security and others, and jump the parliament. So he has a lot of negotiation power through the application of tariffs. And what I'm trying to say here is that each country, Trump wants from each country different things. It's not necessarily a commercial issue per se. What's happening, for example, in Mexico is that Trump is using the tariffs as a bargain coin to get some deals related to security. And Trump did promise to his voters things like more strong borders, more seizing or major seizings of fentanyl and other different illegal drugs, within other things related to, and the arrest of major cartel leaders, drug cartel leaders. And that has actually happened very fast in Mexico. You can see the extradition of many cartel leaders recently, also the seizing of major fentanyl cargos. And I think that is making Trump very happy because he's showing his voters that Mexico is actually cooperating. So there is some optimism that they will reach maybe to some agreement because of the way Trump is speaking about the president and other factors. But still, as this conversation has been about, with Trump, you never know. So let's see what happens.
The cloud of uncertainty is still there. Yes. I'm afraid that's all the time we have. But Rui, thank you very much for your insights today.
Yeah, thank you.
And Celia, as always, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts. Right, well, that does end this edition of Press Perspective. We return same time tomorrow with a light discussion on International Happiness Day, which actually is today, March 20th. See you tomorrow.